if you can't sell the problem to the audience, to the reader, you're not going to be able to sell him the solution. He has to care about the problem first before he cares about the solution you're trying to sort of pitch.
Welcome back to the Exploding Podcast. My name is Teja, and thanks to each and every single one of you who come back every time to learn, to execute, and to exploit for a better purpose. And thank you so much for taking your time out of your day for becoming a better version of yourself that you admire the most. And I am so grateful today to sit down with an AWS Service Hero and about to share his experience with the cloud over a decade now, and about to uncover his insightful thoughts towards building and growing a community in the cloud. Right? When I say in the cloud, it's about the cloud, right? And making it more impactful is one of the most important things. And please help me to welcome an independent consultant, Serverless Hero, a developer advocate. As you already know, he is none other than Jan Sui. Before we move ahead, a huge shout out to Sundag Education for sponsoring this episode. Join over 500,000 learners across the world. You can learn machine learning, AI, and big data just for $25 a month. All you need is some prior programming or scripting experience with a high school level math. With a lot of hands-on activities and exercises, you can practice whatever you have learned. Visit sundag-education.com and sign up for a free trial course to start your journey towards a lucrative and rewarding career in the hardest technology. That's sundag-education.com. Now, onto the ad-free show. Jan is an experienced engineer who has run production workload at scale in AWS for over 10 years. He has been an architect and principal engineer with a variety of industries ranging from banking, e-commerce, sports streaming to mobile gaming. He has worked extensively with AWS Lambda in production in the last 4 years, and nowadays he splits his time between advancing the states of serverless observability as a developer advocate at Lumigi.io and helping companies around the world adapt serverless as an independent consultant. Jan is also AWS Service Hero and a regular speaker at user groups and conferences internationally. He's also the author of Production Ready Serverless and co-author of Serverless Architectures on AWS, second edition, both by Manning Publications. And he creates and maintains the active blog at theburningmonk.com, and he hosts a weekly podcast at realworldserverless.com. And I can't wait anymore to start exploring with Jan Sui. Thank you so much for joining us, Jan. I'm so glad that you are here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really a pleasure to have you here, like an AWS Serverless Hero, and it's like a decade of experience into AWS and working with cloud and everything, right? But initially, a very open question for you, like over the last decade, even there exist many other cloud service providers, right? But you choose to stick with Amazon. Of course, there are a ton of people who are also doing it the same thing, right? But why is it so specific, like AWS and Amazon instead of others?
So I guess if you go back to 2009 or 2010 when I first started, so I was just leaving a investment bank in the Canary Wharf. So I was working for Credit Suisse at the time, and then I left there around the end of 2009 and 2010 and went into a company making Facebook games. So at the time we were going to AWS straight away. Everything was already built on AWS, and then about a year later we also did some work with Google Cloud using Google using Google App Engine. So App Engine was pretty good. It was really good, and also a bit of ahead of its time as well. And we also started using Google BigQuery as well. So it wasn't everything on AWS. It actually took AWS quite a few years to release something similar to BigQuery. So nowadays you have Amazon Athena, which was announced in the 2016. For us, I guess most of our workload has remained on AWS, and I have spent most of my time with AWS ever since, partly because they have the most complete ecosystem of different services they offer, and also because over time you build up relationships with their business development side of things, with their account managers, with all these different, I guess, also your knowledge as well, which becomes very useful. And as you build new things, new products, new teams, and also there's never been for me a strong enough reason to move out of AWS, because everything I need to do could be done using AWS already, apart from a few things where AWS didn't have a very good service or or a comparable service to something like Google BigQuery, which I kept using Google BigQuery even until recently, depending on the project and depending on what it is that we actually need. But by and large, most of what I need to do could be done on AWS, and I can leverage my existing knowledge, but also existing network of people I can reach out whenever I need help, or whenever I need to, say, escalate an issue. Having previous relationships with people within AWS can help me a lot. So especially when there's something happening, and I just need to get someone to help me escalate the problem, because I'll be losing customers, our service is down or something. So having those relationships that can help me through those problems has always been very useful. And I think also one of the reasons that AWS has done really well compared to the other cloud provider has been that it's really good with taking feedback from customers. So they've got this whole culture whereby anyone on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or just people you meet in person from AWS, you can complain to them. And then somehow, maybe like next year, maybe a few years down the road, the problems they're complaining about, they either fixed it, or they release a new service or new features that address those problems. So they are really good with taking feedback from customers, much better than the Microsoft, and way better than Google. Google, when it comes to this kind of feedback from outside, from external customers, has been traditionally really bad. You almost get this sense from talking to a lot of Google developer advocates that that the teams just don't really value those feedback from the internal feedback or external feedback as much as say what they think is the best thing to do. They build great services, no doubt, but they're oftentimes not well thought through, or at least is often not what customers actually want. And that's I think that's one area that Amazon has been traditionally very good in terms of support. And also, I guess with Google, they have got this bad image, and it's probably justified. I think in my mind that they don't really care so much about you as a customer. They would just deprecate services that you have built your business around if it's not profitable for them. Whereas Amazon has made a very strong point about backward compatibility, about not breaking services, about not deprecating services that not many people are using. So nowadays, if you're still using some of the oldest services like SimpleDB, which doesn't even show up on the console anymore, you can still use it if your account had it before, and if you had a really old application that was built a couple of years ago and still running on SimpleDB, then you can keep using it. They're not going to just deprecate it. So from like a business point of view, having that level of trust with your vendor is very important, especially if you're in for the long haul. And it's difficult to do that with someone like Google. I think Microsoft has done a really good job, and I think that if I was to move to different cloud for some workload, it probably would be to Azure instead of to GCP or Google Cloud Platform. That's it. Microsoft has been very strong in the enterprise sector, and I think a lot of the sort of .NET shops and a lot of companies that are traditional in that bubble are moving to Microsoft already. But for me, I've been with AWS for a long time. For me, it just never got to the point where I need to do something that I can't do with AWS, and I have to move to Azure or to Google. So there's never been strong enough reason for me to do that.
That's beautifully said about, you also disclose about what kind of features that they provide. And as you've been, it's over decades that you've been into cloud and all of that, and you've been working with business and helping a lot of business existing to scale up themselves and everything, right? But as you mentioned about the Google Cloud, so by any chance, if you get a chance to speak with their team, internal team who could make decisions, what would be your advice and kind of a feedback for them, just to have their words on here?
I guess it's not about specific teams. It's a culture thing. I think with Google, it's a culture thing.
Yeah.
That they are great engineers, and that they want to they build really good services. In terms of quality wise, I mean, they had probably the best compute platform compared to Amazon and compared to Microsoft. And there have been quite a few companies who just runs virtual machines on Amazon. They decided to move to Google Cloud because the equivalent virtual machines are more powerful, so it can get more done with a fewer number of servers, and therefore that translates to a pretty significant cost savings. And the networking is also significantly better as well. So it's quite interesting that Google, not recently, I guess sometime the last 12 or 18 months, that they released, I guess, a new tier for the infrastructure as a service layer to provide worse networking at a lower cost. Whereas Amazon have been traditionally going the other way, they have released the higher premium tiers for the infrastructure as a service platform that gives you better networking. I mean, for me, it almost feels like Google is the sort of the nerd cloud. There's a lot of really interesting technical stuff. That's great, but there's just a lot of low-hanging fruit for things that you need day to day that they just don't seem to care, even though those are the pain points that the customers are having. So I think that's a culture thing that need to be addressed from top down. Amazon, you hear the AWS people, Amazon people always talk about the 14 leadership principles, and they are really big on that whole culture side of things. And a big part of that is listening to customers and taking feedback and building things that address customer pain points, even if it's not necessarily things that that aligns with your philosophy for how you see your service, but it's a practical thing. It's the thing that your customer is asking for, and I think that is something that is not about individual teams at Google. It's a cultural thing. I have seen lots of other companies that has got that sort of mental of we know better. We build the most beautiful, the most elegant, the most performance services. And I think Google oftentimes feels like that, where they're striving for technical excellence rather than customer satisfaction.
Cool. Oh my God. I mean, that's clearly mentioned. I mean, very structured in a very specific way, but I think it's going to be helping out others as well. But let's get back to the early stages of you, where you've been a software engineer for a couple of years, right? And not much related to cloud. But later on, you made a shift towards AWS and cloud related work, right? But what actually made you to go make a shift to cloud and, be on more about cloud and explore more into it and do more work into it? And why was that shift happen? Like, what's your deep intention behind that?
So I sort of finished my university degree in 2006. So in my third year of my master's degree for computer science, I won a prize for some computational complexity module or something like that.
Cool.
The prize was sponsored by Credit Suisse, and in that summer I did an internship with them, and then I got a job offer to go back full time, which I did, which at the time was great. The salary was very good. It was beyond, way above average for a new graduate at the time, and I had a job waiting for me. But when you're working in the in a banking environment, at least in those kind of environment that I was in, you're building applications that are used by maybe 20 people inside the bank. You're probably using technologies and tools that are a few years out of date compared to what's the most cutting edge there, right there at that point. And it took me a few years to kind of realize that. At the time, I remember sitting in big meetings with maybe 15 people talking about how we're going to get the next server added to our data center and all the different patches we're going to need to install. And it was a big event. Everyone got really excited when the server came, but it took 6 months. It was like a 6-long project to procure that server and to configure it, to put it into a data center and all of that. And then as I read more and more about other people are doing blogs and see other things that are actually happening, and then I can see that, okay, I'm doing stuff that are at least a few years behind the curve. So I wanted to get out and I want to become a better software engineer. I want to try do things that are more interesting, that are more sort of technically challenging. Even if the money was not as good, I actually took a pretty big pay cut when I left the Credit Suisse to go to the next job. But there I went into a company that's building Facebook games. Now we're building games that was at one point was used by over 1 million active users every day. And it was everything was on AWS, and you learned about using virtual machines instead of waiting 6 months for a new server. Now you're talking about 5-6 minutes to get a new server up and running. So it's a very different paradigm, and also there's you're building for a completely different level of scale. You're building for a completely different set of audience, and now you also are working in the 24/7. Whereas before, it was all around 9 to 5 for the business hours. So when the market closes, everyone goes home. No one uses your app. But now we're building systems that's 24/7.
Yeah.
Downtime is really important. There's no, you can't just go down for a couple of hours at a time. Yeah. So technically, it becomes all very different. Very challenging, and also with the cloud, you got this new, I guess, way of thinking. Whereas before, now we have to be very careful about our servers, how we configure them, how we patch them, and every deployment is a very big event. You have to be really careful. You don't do them very often. And now it's servers are the saying is that the cattle is not pets. If one dies, get a new one. It doesn't matter. And there's a lot more sort of focus on automation, and you hear about things like infrastructure as code. You hear about all this CI/CD or continuous integration, continuous delivery, all the modern techniques and practices. We were doing that pretty early on because it's required. You need to have those automations for you to be able to work efficiently. Having a small team that are building applications that are used by millions of people and have to be up 24/7. So in terms of there's a lot of the practices that I guess we take for granted today that everyone's doing it. Back then, it was quite early. It was quite new. A lot of them are still, quite raw. There's a lot of problems with the tools and things like that. But it's part of the fun. It's still part of the challenge as well. And and that I guess that got me thinking about software engineering and software development in a different light, a different way of thinking, different priorities. And now we're deploying things in small increments, small releases rather than big bang. We're doing a lot of work so that we can monitor things easily, quickly, and we try very hard to make applications stay up. Whereas before, you have an ops team that looks after all the operation support. So if something breaks, they are the ones that are have to deal with it. Now we are on call as engineers, which means if something goes wrong at 3 o'clock in the morning, which it often does because that's the peak time in the US. In the UK, that's us 3 o'clock in the morning, and I don't want to be waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning. So you work very hard to make sure that what you deploy is reliable, is stable, and you build in patterns so that your application will just heal itself if something goes wrong. All of those are things that are that's taken many years for the wider industry to adopt as a standard. But luckily nowadays most people are doing those things now, which is great. And over time I just more and more services was released on AWS that makes a lot of things that we used to build ourselves. Now it's just out of the box, much easier. And certainly, especially with the release for Lambda and then other services that integrate with Lambda, nowadays I can do something that used to take me months in just a couple of days. Because even with all this automation and all these things available on AWS, there's still a lot of infrastructure, there's still a lot of configuration, there's still a lot of things I have to do as a backend engineer. So I'll probably spend I used to spend 80% of my time just dealing with infrastructure and ops, and 20% writing business logic. And with Lambda, with all these serverless technologies, I can switch that around. I write 90% of the time to spend my time on business logic, and maybe 10% or less on the actual dealing with infrastructure. So it means that as an engineer, I can get a lot more done, and that's good news for everyone.
Yeah.
Product teams are happy because you get more done quickly, and the customers are happier because they don't have to spend as much on my salaries or whatever to get a product out. So yeah, I think it's been a continual trend, and it's getting better and better.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a far journey from the beginning and all up to the core. You took me your entire journey, sharing all of the things and what the best parts, where you learned the most, and everything, right? But I've been following you and your work for quite a bit time, and every time I see your content, it's kind of, you share the things that it's kind of very hard to find on the internet. But here, the thing that I found very interesting is like the burning monk. So what's the deep meaning behind, why do you really name it like the burning monk? So where the monk in between came in middle?
So I don't know if you know this band called Rage Against the Machine. So they were my favorite band when I was growing up. I think when I first heard about them, when the Matrix came out, I think that was 98, 99. When the Matrix came out, I was still in the, I guess it was in the UK. I think that's year 11, maybe sixth form, and that kind of blew me away. The Matrix, and then right at the end, the soundtrack at the end was by Rage Against the Machine, and then I just got really into them and got really into heavy metal and hard rock and all this music, that style of music. And so yeah, the debut album for Rage Against the Machine had the Burning Monk, who is he's a monk, a Vietnamese monk who set himself on fire in protest to, I guess, the Americans' involvement in Vietnam at the time, so that was the cover for Rage Against the Machine's debut album, and that's where the nickname came from. And since then, I've been used the Burning Monk for email and all these other things, and just kind of stuck.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of really out of the box. Like there is very rare people find with such a kind of a names, and your Twitter handle is also the same, like the Burning Monk. So it's kind of fun, right?
It's memorable.
Absolutely. Anywhere you try naming a new instance, again, you'd go with the Burning Monk again. Absolutely. So, and also for the people out there here who are actually, students, and I have a lot of friends who usually says the words, listen to me. I mean, I think this is one of the most frequently asked questions for you, but let me tell you that. So I usually get kind of questions like, dude, I'm not good at coding and I don't want to do it and I'm not really loving with it, but can I go for cloud? Can I go for DevOps? Can I go and build and take care of infrastructure and make my career into it? So what would be your response? Like without loving coding or without, having an interest, but they can work on it. But is that a preferable way to go ahead and take it ahead?
In terms of AWS, it's not just about coding, and certainly I think coding has becoming less and less. Maybe not less important, but it's less challenging. Certainly with serverless, it means a lot more to understand how different AWS services work, how they interact with each other, and so you can choose the right service that actually does what you need, maybe 90% of what you need, and then you need to write some code for the other 10%. And certainly, I think with in terms of the code I've been writing, what I'm writing nowadays is a lot simpler to a lot of things that I used to write maybe a few years ago. So I definitely think with things like serverless, you're talking about Lambda, you're talking about API Gateway, you're talking about AppSync, and talk about all these different managed services that has solved a lot of the hard problems that you typically run into as you try to build a scalable and performant service. So I do think that coding skills is still important. You need to be able to reason about code, but probably more important than that is be able to think system-wise. So think about systems rather than individual components so that you can see how everything fits together. I mean, personally, when I look at a system, the first thing I want to understand is just how do the data flows from one end to the other, from a user touching a screen to how does it get into your database, trying to understand all of that flow. And that flow can sometimes be really interesting and complicated depending on how the system works. It's not just always API to APIs. There's a lot of background processing. There's a lot of data streaming. There's a lot of data lakes and batch jobs, all these different things. So understanding that side of things is just as important. And sometimes you can, there's a lot, there are a lot of maybe architects or solution architects and whatnot. Those kind of jobs that doesn't require you to be writing code every day. No, you should have a basic understanding of code to be able to reason about code and look at the code, understand what it's doing. But it's just as important to understand from a higher level, how does the system actually work? How do all the different Lego pieces fit together? So in terms of DevOps, that's also writing a lot of code as well. There's typically a lot of writing maybe infrastructure as code, CloudFormation or Terraform or whatever. So I guess it's a different kind of code you're writing. You're writing something that describes your infrastructure. But I guess that's another thing about DevOps as well. That's kind of what we perceive and when we talk about DevOps. But DevOps was never specifically about the provisioning infrastructure in the first place. The whole DevOps movement started as a way to talk about several principles and practices that we want to employ to make sure to make someone pushing committing some code to it running in production, shorten that time, and also to improve the quality of our system as well. But in modern times, I guess a lot of that when people talk about DevOps, they're really talking about infrastructure engineering, provisioning infrastructures, and all of that. And if you want to work in tech and you don't want to write code at all, there's still lots of other jobs that doesn't involve any writing any code at all. So you've got there's a lot of product side of things, understanding how people use products, understanding actual business problems that companies have, and how your application, how your solution can actually solve those problems. And there's also project managers, there are Scrum Masters, there's business analysts. There's still lots of jobs in tech that doesn't involve writing code.
Cool. I mean, that's beautifully said. Maybe for the people who are out there who are actually looking for getting into DevOps and not loving to code, this should definitely help them. Definitely a lot. And also like people who are actually, getting into, working with instances and working on turning on and everything. So I see a lot of people and a lot of stories in my end as well, burning a lot of money unintentionally, right? So it happens very often. So we kind of burn the money existingly and unintentionally out of the way. But what are your tips for them to actually, save and make it optimized and not to burn all of your money by just living out something?
Yeah, so with certainly with serverless technologies, when we talk about serverless, we're talking about mostly services where you don't pay for them when you're not actually using them.
Yeah.
So if you look at services like Lambda, like API Gateway, like DynamoDB, if you don't use it, it's not going to cost you anything. And when you do use it, you pay for just the requests that you're processing, just the things that you are computing, and only for for as long as you actually need them. So a lot of companies that are not dealing with really high throughput, and they can actually save a lot of money by moving their workloads into serverless components. In fact, I was working for a company, a social network, a few years back. When we moved the social network to running pretty much entirely on API Gateway and Lambda, we probably saved about 90% of our running cost.
Cool.
Because we were running a lot of EC2 instances, so those virtual machines, even though we don't need them all the time, but because the traffic is quite spiky, so we needed a lot of headroom so that when there is a spike, your social network, so whenever like a big influencer does something, there's a whole bunch of traffic, but then there's nothing happening, much in between. So For those kind of spiky traffic, we had to run a lot of servers all the time and only use about 3-5% maybe of what we actually spend. Whereas with a serverless, you only pay for what you use, so we were to make a big saving. And I've known a few other companies who has also had similar stories. I think Finra from the US, they are the financial regulators, one of the financial regulators in the US. They also they said that they improved the cost efficiency by 3 times when they moved from EC2 to Lambda as well. And a few other companies I've spoken with in the past, smaller startups, has also quoted anything from 30% to 90% saving when they move to serverless. So serverless technologies for a lot of small to medium and enterprises can be very cost efficient. But I think the biggest cost when you look at the large enterprises is not so much in the infrastructure, but it's in the staffing, because as I mentioned, I can do the same amount of work. I can get the same amount of output for the business as individual in a couple of days now compared to say maybe a couple of months a few years ago. So imagine if you scale that to large enterprises where they need a whole team of engineers to build something spend 6 months to build something. That is really, really expensive. But if you can get a few people more productive and they can do them a lot faster, then you're looking at huge savings on the staffing cost. So for the smaller companies and the large companies, where the cost saving is going to come from could be very different. But all in all, I think serverless technologies can be very cost-efficient options for a lot of different workloads.
Yeah. And your journey is more like a serverless hero now. You've been expertised and everything, doing, making the thing serverless and making it more cost-effective. So how about your journey? Like, can you take me to your journey, like how you become a serverless hero in AWS?
So the AWS Service Heroes, or the AWS Heroes program, it doesn't, I guess one thing I should clarify is that it doesn't recognize expertise per se, but it recognizes contribution to the community. So I've written probably at this point over 150 different articles on different topics around AWS and serverless. And I've also done a lot of talks, at this point, probably like 200 different talks on user groups and conferences and whatnot. So I've given a lot to the community, and it's because of that work that AWS has recognized me as a serverless hero for my contributions for the community. It doesn't necessarily make me an expert, even though I think I'm pretty good at what I do. So in terms of how that happens, it's, I guess, as far as I can tell, they have an internal, I guess, a group of advocates and maybe solution architects, so internal AWS employees that would nominate people that they know, whose work they know every quarter, and then from that pool of nominees, they will pick out a few and then add them to and then recognize them as heroes. It could be community heroes if you arrange user groups and conferences and things like that. Or it could be, I guess, more specialized heroes like me, a serverless hero because I focus on the serverless area. Yeah. Others maybe, container heroes. They may be big data heroes or database heroes or whatnot. So I guess a part of that is, you do what you do, you give it, you do work that gives to the community. And then part of that is going to be just luck that somebody notices your work and somebody within AWS nominates you the next quarter. A lot of that is luck, but then the more you do, then the more likely you will be recognized. Personally, I would say that the recognition has been useful from in terms of, as an independent consultant. It gives me some extra credibility when the customers are talking to me. But it doesn't. Again, it's not about expertise. So you still have to. You have to do. You still have to do your work to make yourself good at what you do.
Yeah. I mean, you're doing it a lot of times, and that's actually kind of a huge contribution that you have given to the community as well. So, and also you make a lot of courses, kind of like a masterclass, AppSync, and everything. So, as you've been into teaching and writing books and everything, right? So, every time when we try teaching someone about something, we unintentionally create a pattern in our brain so that we could express in such a way so that others could understand very easily, and they can actually get connected with us, with our intentions, with our thoughts, and the way we explain, right? So what is your thought process behind delivering content to others, not only about AWS content or anything about serverless, but in general? So how do you think, and how do you actually let others understand what you are actually trying to explain?
Yeah, so I think I guess I apply the same the process or methodology to writing an article, as well as to putting a talk together, or putting a course together. Is I like to basically try to tell a story as much as possible, and always start with the problem. Typically, I guess for my article, I'll probably spend maybe a quarter or maybe a fifth of the article just talking about the problem. The idea is that if you can't sell the problem to the to the reader, you're not going to be able to sell him the solution. He has to care about the problem first before he cares about the solution you're trying to sort of pitch. So I spend a lot of effort on making sure that the problem is that I'm explaining the problem in a way that you can understand, and also you can sympathize. If you can sympathize with me and understand why this problem is a problem worth solving for me, then you have a much then I, as a writer, have a much better chance of convincing you that the solution is also one that's worth reading about and learning about. So that's probably one of the most important thing, and also the in terms of constructing something together. And the other thing I try to do as much as I can is try to write something that is using, I guess, simple words as much as possible. There's a really good site called let me see, I forgot what it's called now. Let me look it up. Hemingway. There's a very good tool called Hemingway, which you can put your text there, and then it tells you the readability in terms of which grade of English. The lower the grade, you want to aim around grade 6 or 7, so that the English itself is easy to understand. You try to avoid complicated words. You try to avoid really long sentences that make it difficult for someone to actually understand. So as much as possible, I try to follow a lot of that's common principle to make the sentence structures, all of that, easy to follow, and avoid long sentences and break them up and all of that. A lot of common, I guess, basic things that when you think about it, makes sense. You're making something that's more easily digestible in the small chunks. I think those are the sort of thought process and the methodology that I normally go through. And I for conference talks, I also try to, if possible, give a strong message at the start. Again, someone whether or not someone makes a decision whether or not to keep listening to you and pay attention to you, maybe within the first few minutes. And if you start talking about yourself, you're introducing yourself and all of that, then it's probably a good way to lose someone's attention within that first couple of minutes. So as much as I can, not always possible, I try to find a strong message that I can deliver within the first couple of minutes, or for articles, the first couple of sentences, deliver a strong message. Another thing you learn is that the same applies to movies and other things as well. That you remember the ending. You might forget the whole film, but you remember the ending. So try to have a strong start and a strong finish. Have something memorable at the end. So that's always a very useful technique as well.
Cool. I mean, it's literally makes me feel like kind of recollect when we actually find a very great kind of a talks or sessions. They make it more powerful by kickstarting in a very high energy and ending with the same energy, right? So,
Yep.
and in the same way, like kickstarting with the kind of a very interesting topics ending up and like ending with the same kind of interesting things that makes you remind. And maybe this is your hack that you usually use, conferences or anywhere out there. So it got revealed now, so people can use it everywhere. So definitely. Now it's over like 6 years plus. Maybe you're into corporate and over a decade. I mean 6 hours plus into you started your own kind of a thing where the Burning Monk, right? So where you make consulting with people there. Let others. I mean, you are helping the businesses to grow and scale with their technicalities, right? But now you're into two different domains. You're into industry, like into corporate. Now you're into self-employed as well, right? You're into self-employment and making your own money on your own end, and you're working for corporate and making some revenue generated, right? But when you compare the both of things, so what fits you the best? Like what's your choice? Do you want to go for the corporate or you want to build your own thing and make it forward?
So I've been in my 15 years of working as in the industry. Most of that has been working for a company, and I've been only doing full-time sort of independent consulting work for the last year, maybe actually more than a year now. I guess about 15 months. And before that, I was doing it part-time for about a year. And I have to say the last 12, 15 months has been great. I've been working full-time for many, many years. I've always worked very hard. I've always worked very long hours, and I've never worked less than 50 hours per week. Sometimes I've worked 80 hours a week for a period of time as well, which you do learn a lot. I have to say, I can't. It comes with some sacrifices, of course. I've never really had much of a social life, and I probably missed out on a lot of other things that people probably enjoy, like hanging out in the pub and seeing friends and things like that. But the learning from working, the learning you get from sometimes working a really tough project, working very long for maybe 6 months, can sometimes equate to learnings that you would otherwise take years to accumulate. And that's one of the things I've really enjoyed working as an independent consultant the last 12 months is that you see a lot of different projects, you see a lot of different clients who have got different constraints, different contexts, different industries. And all of that means that different learning. And one of the biggest thing that I guess in terms of the sort of value it brings me is it gives me a wider perspective than someone who's only ever worked in an enterprise environment or someone who's ever worked in a startup environment, where the approach you would take is probably very, very different because you have to factor into account the politics, how fast things can actually be allowed to move, the scale you're dealing with, and lots of other things like that, which having worked in these different industries and different contexts has, I guess, provided me with some of that, has prepared me for some of these different contexts I'm seeing now with my clients. Another thing is that as, I guess, if you're in the US and you're working for one of you're working for a FANG company, then in terms of money, you'll be well sorted. I think everyone who has worked at a FANG for a few years will be a multi-millionaire because the salary there is pretty ridiculous. The cost of living is also quite high as well in the US. But in the Europe and everywhere else, or even other parts of the US as well, the salary just not as high. In the Europe and UK, at least you got really good social safety net, so your spending is also probably not as high. But that said, there's a very hard ceiling in terms of how much money you can make. Even as one of the top people in the industry, if you're working for a company, then your earning potential is pretty limited. But as an independent consultant, I have a lot more flexibility in terms of how I charge, how much I charge for my services. And it also allows me to work less, but still make maybe the same amount of money with less hours or maybe even more money. for doing less work, and which has been what I've found so far, that I've significantly raised my earnings potential, even though as a limited company, those money belong to my company technically, they don't belong to me. But yeah, so I think so as working for myself, I don't think I don't think I'll go back to working full time for somebody else at this point, because I think the last 12 months has been really, really enjoyable from multiple fronts, in terms of having more control over how much I work and what I work on, what projects I take on, to having a much higher earning potential, and also just being able to work a little bit less as well. It's getting older, and you kind of appreciate some of the downtime you have, so that you can do other things, try out different things, and not always not always on the hook to deliver the next project, the next feature. And I think that has been great.
Yeah, totally. And in the same way, like in the whole journey of building the Burning Monk as an individual entity, or it's all whole your intention on behind it, right? So what was your actual challenges while building it forward? Like maybe it's about closing a deal, or maybe it's about making others understand. So what are your challenges in that?
So I think for me, the probably biggest challenge early on is just understanding how to set up a business, how to run a business. Never done it before, so how to set up a company, how to do all of that, accounting, taxes, and all of that was challenging, and understanding all the different. I guess the market that took a little bit of time, understanding how to price myself to get to get the good return for my efforts, and all of that took time, and I'm getting better at that, but still a long way to go in terms of where I probably want to be. From that regard, what has worked really well for me, and this is something that a lot of other people struggle with early on, is getting customers through the door. Luckily for me, I've had a lot of I guess the audience, having been writing, blogging for many years, lots of people read about my contents, they know about me from my talks, my articles, and so on. So that has made a lot of the work to generate leads a lot easier.
Yeah. Now we're talking some, marketing kind of terms like leads and filtering, and all of that. Now you're transforming into a business person again. So definitely. So how did you figure that out? So maybe you tried reaching out some consulting service just like you, a business consultant, and moved forward, and then you fixed it up. So how did you figure out those things, like starting a business, and how you made it easy?
I guess for the marketing side of things, I've just been learning as I go, and I tried a lot of different things. So for the marketing side of things, I've just been sort of learning as I go. To try lots of different things, and then see what works, what doesn't. I guess for me, the biggest marketing tool has always been my blog, the talks I'm doing, and lots of things I'm doing in the community. Yeah. So the more I give, also it turns out the more I get back. The more I give out information for free, the more people are coming to me to ask for help. As a potential lead into a client. So I think that has kind of been a really good feedback loop. Partly because it's just what I like to do. I like to write. I like to share, and I find that that's the best way for me to learn most of the time. That if I can explain something clearly to someone else, then it helps me understand or verify that I understand the topic properly. So I like to do that, and that turns out it's got a nice side effect of helping me generate a lot of leads. Other than that, the other business side of things, I've asked friends. I've, I guess, follow a few people people like Jonathan Stark and Philip Morgan, a few other people like that, who's mostly focused on helping consultants make more money and to run a better business, and how to market themselves, how to generate leads and things like that. Some of that has been really useful. There's also a book by Alan Weiss called $1 Million Consultant. There's a lot of information, really good information about how to position yourself, or the importance of positioning yourself, and also how you do contracts and things like that. Some tips around those. So I've been just learning from different bits here and there. There's not been a single place I go to that learn everything, but I've just been trying to find different things that works for me and for my particular niche. But yeah, so it's I have to say, it's, for me, I haven't been doing this for very long compared to a lot of people. So I can't say I'm an expert at consulting work or marketing. I've just been trying a lot of different things and trying to see what works. But yeah, so as much as possible, I try to I try to put out content regularly so that people are always reading about stuff that I'm sharing, and then and if they need more help, sometimes they come to ask me to help them professionally as a consultant.
Super. I mean, yeah, it's moreover like you keep doing it and you more keep on working on it further, and end of the day you'll be like a gained taking a lot of consulting business works and then you make it forward. So just like that. And yeah, so these are all the questions that I've been wanted to ask you and let others listeners to get your perspective and all of that. So before we go forward and hop the call off, but do you have any suggestions for someone out there who is actually getting into AWS or cloud? Anything? Do you want to share something to that?
I guess if you're brand new to AWS and you want to just get a foothold, because right now AWS is so big compared to what it was when I started. I find if you take one of those certification courses for developer associate or AWS solution architect associate, those courses themselves are a great way to learn a lot of the basics, cover the basic concepts and a lot of the sort of common services that you would likely use. That's probably the easiest way to get an overview of what are different services, what are some of the key concepts. But then after that, you want to really just be building something. There's no better way to learn than to do it. You can read all you want, but then there's just gonna be a lot of things you will only ever really appreciate and know if you actually try yourself. And also, one of the things that I try to do is I try to tell you stories and share things that people run into in practice in the real world, because there's a lot of things that are not going to be covered by the documentations. There's going to be a lot of problems that that you won't read about in the documentations or on a course, but you will run into them when you're actually doing things. So a lot of what I write is try to provide that real world lens on what it's really like to work with different services and the real problems that you will likely run into. A lot of them falls in the gaps between what's in the documentations and what you actually see in the real world.
Absolutely. And how far the same, let's also give a word out for the consultants out there who's actually trying out to build a business with the skills, what they have. So do you have any specific advice for them to grow every single day just like that?
I guess for consultants, I'm probably not qualified to really give advice to consultants, but for someone who's I guess from my experience, I guess being a consultant has been the really enjoyable journey for me so far. It's certainly been one that has changed my perspective and my lifestyle and everything. So it's definitely something that I think more people should explore as a career opportunity, especially as you enter what the charity major describes as the second half of your career as engineer. Most of us, at some point, if you want to stay as engineers, you hit some sort of ceiling, either in terms of a title, in terms of responsibilities, or in terms of salary. And I think for people who are looking for answers for what do I do now, as you enter into the second half of your career, being a consultant is probably a very good option for many of you, especially if you have existing network of friends and people that you work with in the past who values your expertise and values you, then that can be a very lucrative business for many of you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge takeaway for everyone out there, Brad. The thing, I mean, what you mentioned is actually very true. Up to a part of our life, the next part, we'll be also looking for being independent, and we're also looking for our own services to be, helping a lot of others as well. Not just for generating a revenue, but also being ourselves so much fulfilled that our own things that we've been learning for years is also making an impact on others.
Yeah, there's also a lot of people who don't want to do that. There's a lot of people who want to build their own startup, want to build products. That's also a very good way to go as well. But for me, I don't want to really do that because building a business, like a product business, is hard work. It's a lot of commitment. There's a very high chance of failure, and I don't know. I just don't think it's something that I want to do at this point in my life. But a lot of people want that. It's a lot of excitement, a lot of risk. Don't always pan out, but yeah, maybe that's for you. Or maybe you want to go into management. You want to go into become a CTO, VP of engineering, or whatever. You want to manage other people. That's also great as well. But there's a lot of us who just want to stay kind of be hands-on, be technical, and don't want to do any of the other stuff because it's just not cut out for us. Then being a consultant is actually quite a really good way to go for people like me who are techies. We want to write code, we want to solve problems. We're not really cut out for building a product business or managing other people's careers.
Yeah, but keep looking on it. Maybe someday you'll be you'll come up with a product, having a lot of services. Maybe in some of the Burning Monk services, something out there. We go ahead. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, thank you so much, Jan. I mean, it's been an amazing conversation for everyone out there who's actually been a consultant or been educators or been learners or been someone who's actually getting into AWS or being someone who's actually trying to make the things serverless, right? So the whole pack from you, like, it's going to be a huge impact for all of them out there. So I think it's going to have a little bit of help, at least from the whole conversation. So it makes a lot of impacts for all conversation out there. So thank you so much for being here, Jan. Thanks for being here. It's been so immense pleasure for me having you on the show.
Thanks for having me, and I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you are the one looking forward to adapting machine learning into your career, take a look at our sponsors, Sundog Education, and start free trial with a lot of hands-on activities and exercises. You can practice whatever you have learned. Visit sundog-education.com and you can find all the direct links in the episode notes below. Thank you.